I'm trying to write again. And I think knowing what success feels like and failure feels like, it's interesting writing again, knowing that you could fail and how bad failure feels, that I need to be able to write for just the enjoyment of it.
Hello, my name is Eline Perez and you're listening to Are You an Artist? Today's episode is with Harry Parker, who speaks about painting, writing books, creativity in the army, and pizza. I really wanted to interview Harry because I loved reading his books and was curious about his life. I'm not disappointed. Harry is generous in sharing, but also playful and funny, so please enjoy listening to this very special episode. Have you done podcasts, interviews before?
I've done bits and pieces, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What have I done? I mean, I've done some radio stuff.
How did you find that?
Yeah, fine.
Okay.
Yeah. I did some BBC things a while ago.
Wow. About like your book or?
Yeah, so I did a BBC Three thing, and yeah, bits and pieces.
Okay.
And I've read my book was Book of the Week on Radio 4.
Oh.
So I read it. So I
So you read the book?
Yeah, I read it for that, and I also read the audiobook, which was a nightmare. It was 3 days, like 7-hour days of just trying to read. Oh, it's good.
I always start with a letter I've written to the guest.
Right, okay.
Dear Harry, we met at the Royal Drawing School, so I guess that you were an artist, but I didn't know that you wrote a book. In an interview you did for Country Life, because I googled your name, you said, I could never really say what I wanted to visually, so I started to write. And so I read Anatomy of a Soldier and loved it. I didn't know anything about the war in Afghanistan, but the way you wrote made me feel as if I was there, following the characters, and of course I became curious about your life. I didn't know that you served the British Army when you were 23 and served in Iraq and Afghanistan. I then discovered that you wrote another book, Hybrid Humans, Dispatches from the Frontiers of Man and Machine, which also moved me very much. So yes, I am very impressed by your work, but also how kind and caring you are when we work together. Thank you so much for giving your time, and let's start with the first question of this podcast. Harry, are you an artist?
Oh, well, thanks for having me on the podcast, and thanks for the kind words about the book. Am I an artist? Yeah, go on then. Yeah, probably. But I think everyone, or most people, are artists.
Yeah.
They just don't know it necessarily.
How would you define that word? Because it's can have so many meanings.
God, yeah, that's a good question. I think anyone who uses their imagination and creates things that say something different about the world or show people something different about themselves than they otherwise would.
Yeah.
So I think it's about, for me, good art is about showing people things that they wouldn't have otherwise thought or understood.
And when you write, do you feel like an artist as well?
Yeah, so I went to art school before I joined the army, so I was very much visual artist. And then, as you said, when I was injured in Afghanistan, I started to paint and draw again, but it always felt a little bit inadequate. You know, never felt like I could say what I wanted to say. And so I started writing. But yeah, it feels exactly the same part of the brain is being used to create the imagery, even though it's words. So when I'm drawing and when I'm writing, it's very much feels the same.
Mm-hmm. And you grew up in Wiltshire. How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, Wiltshire, yeah.
It's so funny because it appears everywhere. Whenever I read about you, like there is the place where you grew up.
Yeah, it's weird that. Well, actually, my dad was in the army, so I grew up in lots of different places. We lived in Germany and Gibraltar.
And do you remember your first drawing?
My first drawing.
Yeah, as a child.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I really remember being in Gibraltar, and the planes used to land in Gibraltar. The airport, the runway goes out to sea on each end. It's sort of built out over the sea, and the planes land. And from the school I was in, you could see these planes. And I remember just sitting there drawing. And those are the first sort of drawings I remember making.
Wow.
But my first drawing I remember was my brother drawing a truck. And my brother's a bit older than me. And I was thinking, God, that's amazing. I wish I could do that. And now he works in finance and can't draw at all.
That's so funny. And when did you decide to really study art?
So I think so I'm quite dyslexic.
Oh.
So when I was at school, maths, English, I found them a real struggle. And I think I had a few teachers who weren't great. And then you just sort of end up in the art department, don't you? You sort of go towards...
By default.
You go towards what you enjoy and what's easier. And then you do it more and more. You get better at it. Because I think people think dyslexic people are creative. But I don't think they are. It doesn't work like that. It's just because they sort of gravitate into these areas that are more creative because they find it easier. But also they have to adapt as well in quite creative ways. And so, at school I was in the art department, drawing, painting, sculpting. And then, I always wanted to be an artist. And so I went and did a foundation course in Falmouth.
And you did the MA in art history, or was that after?
That was afterwards,
Okay.
So after being in Falmouth, where I was sort of meant to be drawing and painting, but mostly surfing and sitting in the pub.
Oh, wow.
Well,
so you surfed?
Well, badly, really badly.
I'm so impressed by people who can do that.
I can't really do it. But that's what I sort of, I should have worked harder. But after that, instead of going down a pure fine art route, I went and did history of art. I think because I was a bit scared of really committing to being a fine artist. And I felt like doing a sort of more academic degree would be better in the long run. Yeah.
And were you interested in when you were there? Or?
Yeah, I was. And as I went through it, I got much more interested in... I ended up being very interested in sort of post-1945 abstract expressionism in America.
Yeah.
Not because I really liked looking at it, but I was really interested in why art had ended up, in this very conceptual... area, having been at school and looked at the Renaissance like we all do when we're younger.
Yes, for ages and
ages and ages, spending time looking at these figurative paintings with all this sort of Western traditions around them, and then it was really exciting to write about more conceptual American pop art and abstract expressionism and minimalism and those sorts of things. Not that I like looking at them as much, but.
Okay.
Yeah, but I just was interested in the sort of, why we'd ended up there.
And why?
Oh, God.
Summarize your master in
why did we end up there?
Or one thing that you learned that maybe you didn't expect?
Well, I think I learned about myself, really, that that I was more... There's a real joy in learning about something and really trying to understand it. And I think in my education, writing and that sort of academic learning had been quite difficult for me. But I think what it taught me was that when you're really into something and you're inspired by it, it became easier.
Okay.
So I think that was probably what I learned.
That's good. And then why did you want to serve the British Army?
Yeah, well, as I said, I've got a very military family.
Okay.
And although I wanted to be an artist or do something creative, I got a really short internship at an advertising agency, which was great, great opportunity, but I hated it.
What did you have to do?
Oh, I was helping the accounts team, and then there was one where we went and did a shoot. I think it was for a Nissan car, like a car advert. And car adverts are just the worst, aren't they? They're so sort of boring, and anyway. So, and I just realised that actually I sort of thought, well, I'm not going to make any money being an artist, which is a bit of a crap thing to think when you're 18 or 19, 20. And then tried something that was sort of like one step away from creativity, or, doing creativity in a certain environment. But I just felt like advertising was lying to people. You're basically lying to people, aren't you? And so after that, and I think the army was always an option because of this family background. And so I joined, And it's actually quite a creative place to be, the army.
Is it?
Well, so, because I think, there's obviously this podcast about being an artist, but the army and military problems, it's all problem solving, right?
So you have to really work on that.
So you're finding solutions to problems, or you're thinking about space and time. So in a really simple sense, they might say, well, you need to take that hill with the enemy on top. And so you have to come up with a plan, and you have to, that is a creative process. And also, you've got I was an officer, so I was leading young people. And there's a real sort of creativity in making teams work and getting people to gel. And I really enjoyed that. Yeah, really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed that about working at the school now. I think that's what I enjoy most, is the people, trying to get the most out of people, trying to make the team sort of work, and do what we do here.
And the way that you wrote the first book is also very creative. That's why I really liked it in a way. When did you decide to start writing?
Yeah, so I wrote, it's interesting. You said I've written 2 books. I've actually written more books than that. I've had 2 books published. So we can talk about failure, what it means to fail to write. But I started writing a more sort of conventional way of writing my story, and it was I think I was quite embarrassed by myself, and also I was very wary of writing. There was quite a few books at the time of sort of, I was out there in Afghanistan and I did this, and the government's crap and we shouldn't be there. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to write a sort of political memoir. And so I was writing lots of different things, short stories, but trying to find ways of being more creative and finding a way to sort of sidestep some of the baggage that came with being.
And when you were writing, were you publishing them in like magazines, or
no?
Did you make anyone read them?
Yeah, a bit, but it was quite sort of personal at that time. And then I wrote a short story from the point of view of a tourniquet as a sort of experiment. And I was talking to a writer about the fact that I wanted to get away from my own voice and my own perspective. And he sort of said, well, you could write from you could make it fiction, write from the point of view of someone else. And I was sort of thinking about how far I could, could I turn it even further away from myself? And that's when the sort of idea that I would write from the point of view of inanimate objects came. So I wrote this short story, and then I thought, that's interesting. And there was something about war and the stuff of war that it sort of seemed to suit.
Yeah.
And so I just kept writing. And then the next object came, and I wrote from a bag of fertilizer, which became the IED. Because when I was injured, I stepped on a landmine, an explosive device. And so I sort of created this story through 45 objects, and each object has a slightly different perspective. And I think the other thing it allowed me to do was to sort of not only think about what happened to me slightly differently and in a creative way.
Yes, yeah.
And I really loved writing it, because people sort of talk about, was it cathartic or was it sort of therapeutic? And it was a bit, but it was more, I used to go to the library and I wrote in my local library, and it was really fun, right? Writing from the point of view of a Persian rug or a bicycle or a pint glass or, an explosion or a weapon. It's really fun. I'd get there and say, well, today I'm going to write from the point of view of a snowball, and then that was really fun and creative and like problem solving. And also it allowed me, the other thing it allowed me to do was to think about the enemy. So to write about the people on the other side of the conflict.
Yeah.
Because I'd always been very interested in, even when I'd soldiered, I think there were soldiers around who were very sort of, they treat the enemy as very much other, you know, they would sort of push them away. But I was very interested in those people because I felt like, well, if I grew up here, maybe I'd be on, you know, maybe I'd be fighting.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'd always been interested in that anyway. And then I think the objects and the sort of point of view allowed me to explore that in hopefully a way that wasn't sort of too sort of contrived, but maybe it was, I don't know. But I think, you know, it allowed me to thread that story through it. And so the last thing to say, I think it sort of allowed me to make it sort of slightly abstract. So I don't mention Afghanistan. I sort of take a lot of the politics out of it.
Yeah.
By doing it.
And I almost feel like each chapter could be a painting, because I feel like objects feels very alive when you see them in a painting, like when there is the movement around, or a bit more than when you see like a photograph. Or
yeah, and somebody said to me, so when I first started writing it, I thought that maybe it was like, because it's 45 objects and they're all quite short chapters, I thought about the fact that it could be read in any order, like a sort of exploded explosion. And also the timelines in it are very sort of strange.
Yes,
I really tried to give that, because that's what it's like being. Firstly, at war is quite strange. It's very disconcerting. You don't know where the enemy are, or time has a sort of strange, way of flowing. It'll be very slow and boring for a long time, and then something very exciting will happen that I think can have. It stresses the body in a way that, and the brain in a way that can impact on the human. And so I was trying to get a bit of that into the book. And then also when you're injured, you're on drugs and you're plugged into a hospital and your body's changed. And so I was trying to get a little bit of that sort of uncertainty into the book. Yeah. So I think those are the...
And then you wrote some... Did you write other books in between?
So I wrote another book, yeah.
Okay.
After I wrote Anatomy of a Soldier, I wrote another book that, I love writing. And I was working with the publisher. They were like, yeah, sounds great. And then I finished it and sent it to them thinking, I think it's all right, this book. And they said, no, we don't like it. We don't think we can publish it. And that was really tough. That spent a year writing. But I think that's another part of being creative. Well, there's two parts really. There's sort of the failure of that was really hard, because I think when you write, it feels very personal. When somebody says we don't like your book, what it feels like is that we don't like you.
Yeah.
And so I found that really tough, and it was quite hard to start again after that. Partly because the idea burnt very bright in my imagination. I was thinking about it a lot. I felt it was a good idea, but I just couldn't quite pull it off. And I think often it's one of those strange things that I think as an artist you have to, for a lot of people, there's something that feels very true to us and important, actually sometimes isn't that important to other people. It doesn't really resonate in the way you think it might.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And I think the other thing is about gatekeepers, about the people and the institutions that make decisions on art. So the editors, the marketing people, the people at publishing houses or galleries.
So you didn't try any other publishing house? Or?
Well, at the time, I have an agent, and we talked it through, and I think, we both felt that it'd be better just to start something new and put it in a cupboard, and not think about it too much, because I think also, you've also got to accept that. Yeah, I think you have to accept that sometimes it's not good. Yeah.
So do you feel like that now, that this book was not good?
I still really burns brightly for me in my imagination, and I think there was lots in it that was okay. I think, in hindsight, it's probably should have been a short story or, something else, like graphic novel or a film or something. It was a different. I think the format should have been different, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you started to write again.
Yeah, it took a while though. Yeah, it took a while. I did start writing, and I had an exhibition of paintings, so I painted for a while.
Okay.
And I set up a festival, like a history festival, for a couple of museums in London. So I'm still working and doing other stuff. And then the Wellcome Collection, which is on the Euston Road, it's a museum there. They have a great collection of medical sort of medical items. It's a library, but they have a museum, and they do exhibitions, and they publish some books, and their sort of mission is about making medicine more understandable to the public. And they sort of approached me and asked me to write a book about prosthetics. And so I went into quite a long period of sort of thinking about that, but actually in that process of writing sort of proposals and trying to get it over the line, it became much wider, and that's what became Hybrid Humans. So it became about what technology, so when you're dependent on technology to either sort of replace or repair the body, what it does to us as humans. And that's what the second book became about, the Hybrid Humans book. Yeah.
And is it because of this book that you went to this conference and you attended these events, or was it something that you would have done?
A bit of both, but it made it sort of, rather than just going to a conference that was in London, I thought, well, I'll go to the biggest one in Europe. Yeah. So it was more like that sort of process, and I definitely wanted to meet certain people who had different experiences to me, because I wanted to sort of, although the book sort of hangs on my own experience in a lot of ways, I wanted to meet other people who had different experiences to make it more sort of universal, I suppose. Yeah.
And how different do you feel now when you paint and when you write? Or is it kind of similar feelings?
Yeah, similar. I think the big differences are, weirdly, it sounds weird, but writing feels like to me, it's a much bigger physical effort. Weirdly, because it's like writing a book is like climbing a mountain. It's such an effort. It's so big. It's also so in your head. So you have to sort of hold the ideas in your head in a way that I love doing. But there's something about painting or drawing that's much more sort of performative in a way. It's much more physical for me.
Yeah.
You know, it's paint, it's things. You know, you stand in front of a surface and you create this imagery, and it's very, in a way, it's very immediate. And writing is slightly different, I think. Although you're creating imagery, they're locked in this code of words. Yes. And actually, writing feels a bit more like sculpting. To me, you sort of you write and you create this sort of form, and then you have to start whittling it away and trying to make it better and make it really sort of sparkle or like really shine. And you sort of, knock a bit off here or add a bit, it sort of feels a bit like that.
And do you have inspirations, like writers that you follow, painters, or?
Yeah, I've never been someone who sort of...
You're not a fan?
I'm not a fan. I do collect.
Okay.
I do sort of collect people, if that makes sense. So I have a little shelf by my thing, which has a sort of set of 10 books that changes, but when I'm writing, I tend not to read so much.
Okay.
Or I read very selective. I'm very careful about what I read. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of people in there. But so when I was writing non-fiction, I'd have a very select sort of group. And then, when I'm trying to write fiction, it's different. But anyway, yeah.
And just to enjoy reading, do you have maybe a couple of favorite authors or?
No, not really. I mean, I've read, what books stick in my mind are often, it's very atmospheric books. And then I have some old sort of classics I love. I love Butcher's Crossing by John Williams. I love that book.
I know the French classics, but not the English ones.
So I mean, I'm quite into American,
American.
Hemingway, and I love Cormac McCarthy. Some of these sort of, and in a way, and then on the flip side, I love Maggie O'Farrell's writing, like The Argonauts. Have you read that? That's a great book. And I love nature writing. Weirdly, sort of some of the Scottish nature writing. It's often about atmosphere, and I think imagery. For me, I think where my writing is probably strongest is around the imagery rather than I don't think I'm very good at dialogue and stuff. I need to work on that.
And do you have like favorite painters or not? People who you discover?
Yeah, again, I don't really have favorites. I've always loved, again, like I love Diebenkorn. I love some of the American slightly macho people, which is a shame, but
do you know why American? Have you been there and seen some work, or?
I think I love America because they have these. It's something to. I've never really been there. I mean, I've been to New York a few times, but I've never been to proper America. I think it's the landscape and the openness and the space between people. Somehow, somehow the setting for American authors get this amazing country they can set things in, whereas here, we're all living on top of each other. It's villages and hedgerows, and it's all a bit twee, isn't it? There's no wilderness. I think it's the wilderness, probably. Yeah, that's probably what that's about. And
you told me that you worked with Candoco Dance Company.
Yeah, very briefly. So I've worked with them. So I worked for a thing called helped out with the Soldiers Arts Academy, which is another charity that was working with injured soldiers, soldiers who either had PTSD or physical injuries, who were interested in acting and performance. And we did a sort of week-long workshop at the place with Candoco, and I drew actually. I sort of drew it. I was sort of artist in residence for a couple of days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was, not very. It was very.
Do you do like other collaborations with like organizations or?
I've done. The more now. What happens at the moment is because the book that I wrote more recently, Hybrid Humans, is it's a bit sciencey. Is I end up doing things with scientists.
How did you find that?
It's fine. I find it less interesting, but I think when you meet somebody who's doing some research or trying to solve a problem, that is quite exciting. It's similar, right? And so there's people who are creating new prosthetics or new sort of therapeutic protocols or something. That I find that interesting, and I sort of want to help, but I don't think it's not really sort of where I want to be creative. Yeah.
And do you prefer to create on your own or with people around?
That's a really good question. I think probably, if I'm being honest, on my own. I mean, I've just helped. It's in review, so who knows if it'll happen. But somebody approached me from UCL to write a paper on future hybrid bodies in sport. So what in 200 years, what a hybrid body looks like in a sporting setting. So it's all about sort of enhancements, both sort of drugs, biological, prosthetics. But he wrote it, and I did some pages of a sort of fictional graphic novel to sort of show some of the more visual stuff. So working in those sorts of collaborations is fun, but I think there's something about having an idea, like a book or a painting, and really working that through in my own mind, both sort of conceptually and visually, which I really love doing. And I think having now published 2 books and written a couple of books that haven't been published, I'm trying to write again, and I think knowing what success feels like and failure feels like, it's interesting writing again, knowing that you could fail and how bad failure feels, that I need to be able to write for just the enjoyment of it. and just for its own sake.
Interesting, yeah.
And that's sort of quite freeing. And sitting at the desk on those days when I can get out of this place and actually write, it's quite nice to know that actually this may never get published, but it's worthwhile doing for me, and it's quite good for me, and I enjoy it, and it gets a part of my brain working that feels like it doesn't always get used. Yeah, it's sort of it's sort of hard to hold a whole novel in your head at once. It's almost impossible, but to try and hold a story and turn it around and think about it and solve the problems of how it's going to knit together and how the characters are going to interact and things like that is really fun and exciting, and I enjoy it.
And because you've been a bit more used to write now, do you feel like you're better at articulating your ideas and communicating in your like daily life, or not necessarily?
That's a really good question. I don't know. It's such a confidence thing, isn't it? How we express ourselves. And, it's very, I always hated acting or performance.
Oh.
I'm so embarrassed by being in my own skin.
Oh.
And so I always think about sort of work and, even teaching here and things like that. It's very sort of performative.
Oh.
So I find that I have to get myself up for that. I have to really sort of, fire myself up for it. Because I'd rather be at home in my little room trying to write on my own, probably. That's where I feel more.
What is it that you don't feel comfortable with? Like, is the being witnessed by?
Yeah, I think it's that. Yeah, I think I'm just embarrassed by myself. And also, sort of judged or saying the wrong thing or getting it wrong. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's old stuff from when I was a child, probably.
Do you have a favorite part of a creative process? Like the beginning, or when you're in the middle and there is all this stuff happening, or when it's kind of just getting finished? And
I think there's sort of two parts to it. There's the sort of thinking about it quite sort of from a distance from the action. So there's a thinking about it at a distance from doing it. So if it's a painting, you think about I think about the painting a lot while I'm not doing it.
Oh, so it's before.
Yeah, and during. So you might have started an oil painting or something, and you're sort of thinking about it while you're not there, which I really enjoy. And it's like as I was writing. No, I was driving in today thinking about what I'm trying to write at the moment. And I really enjoy that feeling of turning it around, thinking about it, trying to work through problems in it. Mm-hmm. And then the second part of it is the actual doing it. So when you're painting or writing, the magic that happens by being creative, how new ideas just come out of nowhere. They just come, and it's as if you haven't created them yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think the act of doing is so creative in itself.
Yeah.
And brings so when I see people who spend a lot of time thinking conceptually without doing, which some artists do, that's so different to the way I think that art gets created in a sort of, because there's those moments of magic, and they might be in painting, they can be about the material. They can be visual, they can be those accidents. Francis Bacon called it the happy accident. It just could be a line.
Oh, or you just, because you're in the moment of writing and you just...
Well, so in writing, I think it's different.
In painting, I can picture it quite easily.
But yeah, I think in writing, when you get into that sort of propulsive, and it can take me a while to get, but when you get into this sort of, you're no longer seeing your fingers. You're not seeing the words. You're just seeing imagery.
Oh.
And that, if I can get into that sort of really in flow, that sort of flow very, you're not seeing what's there. You're seeing the story.
Yeah.
It's very visual for me. I think that's when things start happening. Lots of writers talk about it. Characters doing stuff they didn't even expect them to do.
I found that fascinating because I have that when I read a book. For me, it's very visual. Like I can see follow the story, but amazing that it can happen when you're writing as well.
Oh yeah, it's all really visual. Yeah,
Wow.
it's very... And I think that's what I like about writing most, is that a painting is a visual thing that lives on a wall,
Yeah.
obviously. But with writing, you create a story in your own imagination, and you are trying to transplant it into someone else's imagination. And it's so weird that, and it's sort of as close to virtual reality. You're creating this world of like smell, obviously all the senses, smell, sight, feeling, emotion, time, space. You create this thing. If someone creates it in their brain, and it's in this little square book.
Just crazy.
And then you can someone else, then you can sort of transplant that into someone else's brain. I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
And then they bring something new to it because they see it slightly differently, and and the words resonate in a slightly different way. And with both the books I've written that other people have read, that have been read a bit more widely, it's amazing when people say, "Oh, I love what you did there. That was so great with that, and how it meant this." I'm like, don't know if I actually meant that, but great, great that you thought that. So it then lives again in. That's quite a weird feeling when the idea that the book then lives, it lives in other people's brains and means something for them and gives them a sort of atmosphere. It's quite weird.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And everybody will have a different meaning from.
Yeah. And I think that's why writing, people talk about sort of writing being a dying art or whatever, but I think...
Oh.
Well, not a dying art, but what's the lead? Probably filmmaking is the leading art of our time, right?
Yeah.
If I could be any sort of artist, I'd probably be a filmmaker, because I think that's the sort of art of our time.
It's really funny because I don't watch movies or series at all, and I feel like a strange person. But because what I like with books is, although like someone is giving me an image, I still have some freedom over how I feel it. And when I watch a movie, for me it's just too many informations, and I feel a bit like they're trying to control my mind or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's why writing will always be an art form that is popular, because you have to work for it as the reader.
Yeah.
You have to put the effort in, right? Because it is an effort to read. People find it a bit of a challenge. But I think through the effort, it's much harder to read a book than it is to watch a film.
Yeah.
But I think through the effort, a human gets more reward.
Yeah, exactly.
And each person will bring something new to it, maybe.
Yeah. I've seen in an interview you did, I think maybe it was for Country Life also. I don't remember.
Oh God, not. It's Country Life.
It's haunting you.
It is haunting me.
I think it's so funny how people, when they get a bit of like, when they get known by people, then we can find information about them that, yeah, it's so funny. So you said that your favorite place in Britain is London?
Yeah.
Because nobody stares.
Yeah, you can be a freak in London.
And not in other places. So
in Wiltshire, which is this place that every article seems to mention, in a small village or a town, everyone sort of knows everyone. Mm-hmm. So it's very sort of tight communities, and because of that, then people feel like they can ask, "Oh, how are your legs?" Or
yeah,
I don't know. There's something about London where you can disappear, and I really like that.
Yeah.
And also there's such diversity, and I mean that in every sense, that I find that exciting.
Yeah.
And there's something gritty as well about it. I like the grittiness of London.
What's gritty? What does it mean?
The grit. It's hard. There's something... there's something so exciting culturally about London, but there's also the grittiness. What's the grittiness? Like the underbelly, like the dark stuff. There's dark and light.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think people find that hard, but I like it.
Yeah, I kind of like it too. It's true in a way.
Yeah,
it's all parts of humanity.
Yeah.
You like Lego?
I like Lego. Yeah.
Why?
Why do I like Lego? Because because it's play. I love playing. I think I'm quite playful, and also it's building.
And unbuilding also maybe.
Yeah, there's it's fun it's just fun, right? I don't know. I think if there's something quite spatial about the way I think about stuff, and I think Lego's quite good for
It's
that.
a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Somewhere. Your favorite film is Karate Kid.
The problem with these things is you just say some stuff. My favorite film is not Karate Kid. I just said that.
I'm so disappointed now.
No, I mean I don't know. I don't know what my favorite film is. I don't really have favorites like that. It's a bit like the writing or the painting.
And it changes every day also, I guess.
Yeah. They just said you've got to say what's your favorite film, and I mean I do quite like Karate Kid. Have you seen it?
Yeah, but a long time ago.
Yeah,
now I want to see it again, I think.
Yeah, we watched it the other day, Cara and I, and it's just quite like the 80s. It's just quite fun. And I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
Good choice.
Yeah. I don't know if it is.
And you like bread?
I like bread.
Did it change or not?
No, I still like bread.
Okay, good.
I'm trying not to eat it at the moment. I eat pizza all weekend.
Oh, I love pizza. This is the favorite thing. But Italian one, not
a British pizza.
Not British pizza. As a human being, what is your strength?
Oh, God. As a human being, what is my strength?
Yes.
That's a really difficult question.
It doesn't have to be
What's
the
your
main
strength?
I think today I'd say my curiosity, because it keeps me very alive.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not feeling very strong at the moment.
What keeps you alive?
What keeps me alive? Well, I think playfulness. I think really I got stuck when I was 12 years old. And now, it's all quite serious being a grown-up. There's lots of serious stuff, jobs and, serious things. But actually, I think I'm quite playful.
Yeah.
Really. And that, I don't know whether that's a strength or not, but...
Keeps you going.
Keeps me going, yeah.
Anything you would like to be better at?
Carving out time to write.
When you have time to write, do you really write, or are you tempted to go for a walk?
The problem I have is I need a sort of run up. What I mean by that is I need time to get back into it. So if I only have a day will be enough to sort of get back into the vibe of what I'm trying to write. But by the end of it, I'll probably only write a little bit, because I'll have spent quite a lot of time fiddling, thinking, rereading. So I often need, the dream is to have like 2 weeks to just go for it.
Do you ever think about doing residencies?
Yeah, all the time.
Anything that scares you?
Anything that scares me? I mean, yeah, being disabled, and sort of when you have a young family, and sort of those sort of protective instincts. That sort of scares me, but not badly. It's just that sort of idea that because I'm an amputee and my ability to sort of protect my family or be sort of resilient for them, I think is probably what scares me.
But don't you feel a bit stronger now because you had to?
Yeah. I mean, psychologically, but I think you have to be careful. You have to be careful saying things like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I mean,
yeah, of course.
I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but I think there's a real narrative that these people, when you survive something big, and we all do, right? We all go through stuff in our lives that hopefully allows us to grow. And I really believe that trauma and difficult stuff that happens to us can let you grow. Not always, some things can be just crap.
Yeah.
But I think you have to be careful as well. I think more people go up and down, right?
Yeah,
over
of course.
time.
But even as you see someone, because for example, my dad, he's got Parkinson's disease, and he's getting really weak now. But the way he still keeps going for me made me see my dad in a completely different way. Like, oh my God, he's so strong. I didn't know he had that inside. So I think sometimes even like if you like the way you can be seen, you don't expect it, but it's like
Yeah, and I think the human is really strong and resilient. Not always. I think, it takes effort.
And I guess it depends on your surroundings also.
Yeah, and that's so true. Everything that's ever happened to you, your education, your family, what happened to you when you were a kid, I think it all stacks up and allows people to either deal with stuff or not.
What kind of kid were you?
Ugh. I'm still a kid.
Were you playful when you were a kid? Like kind of.
I think I was probably quite sort of reserved and quite insular, and I was just embarrassed by life.
Oh.
Very embarrassed by life.
Embarrassed by life?
Yeah, by myself, by,
Oh. Yeah. Do you have a favorite color?
Favorite color?
Yeah.
My daughter asked me this a lot. It's blue. It's currently blue with a little bit of orange.
Oh.
Somewhere in the blue.
That's good. She prepared the question for me.
Yeah. She's always asking me, what's your favorite color?
And if you were an animal?
If I was an animal?
Yeah.
Oh, this is another difficult question that my daughter often asks me. Because I think probably, because the easy one is say dog, because then you're close to humans. You're sort of in a house.
Do you have a dog?
No.
Ah.
But I think probably an elephant.
Ooh.
Probably. Something like an elephant.
Okay. What makes you want to be an elephant?
I just think they're pretty cool, they're sort of warm and they connect to I like connections. They connect to each other. They're not solitary.
I don't know much about elephants.
They sort of live in groups.
Okay.
So they have families and stuff. And I think I'd miss not having people if I was like an eagle or some sort of, I don't know, lone tiger or something. I don't know. Anyway.
Ah, interesting. And where do you feel at home?
Where do I feel? It's a really good question because my partner and I talk about it a lot. What home means to us. Because home's not really, because I lived in 19 different houses by the time I was 20.
Wow.
Because my family were moving around. So it's not really about a place. It's more about a feeling.
Were you sad when you would have to leave, or you just got so used to it?
I was just so used to it. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think now I quite like having we have a place that we sort of made our home. And I like it.
Okay.
You like having a place. But I think it's more about where friends and family are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have the strongest desire in life?
For anything in particular?
Yeah, anything that's...
Just, do I have a strong desire in life? I think I'm pretty lazy.
Wow.
I have an underlying level of laziness. So I have to work.
I feel like the people who work the most tell me they're lazy.
Yeah, well, I think, so there's just a war analogy, right? After Vietnam, the American Defense Department did a bit of study on what makes a good army officer, so the people who are leading. And they split it into 4 categories. One is stupid, lazy. One is stupid, keen, so, would go and do everything. One is clever, lazy, and one is clever, keen, right? So these 4 categories. The best officers were clever, lazy.
Yeah.
Because they would make a really good plan and then they would do it in the most efficient way.
Yeah, least effort.
The most dangerous were stupid, keen, because they make loads of plans and try and do everything, but they were doing it in a really crap way. And then the other 2. So the second most dangerous was actually keen, clever, because you were still trying to do too much stuff. And the second least dangerous was stupid, lazy. So basically being lazy in that context,
that is interesting,
was seen as being useful because you were being efficient with your time and your sort of, so I don't know if that still rings true, but that may be linked to why some people say they're lazy. It probably doesn't look like I'm lazy from the outside, but I think I feel lazy from the inside. So my partner likes to enjoy the journey. So if we come back from holiday, she'll just leave all the stuff that we've, all the bags, she'll just leave them on the landing and she'll like deal with it over a whole week. Whereas I'll get back and I'll want to like tidy everything away before I have a cup of tea and I relax.
Yes, I have the same problem.
Because I can't relax until some of that stuff's done.
Yeah.
Or I find it hard to relax.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So
maybe
she's making a cup of tea. Yeah. You just unpacking everything.
And I'm trying to unpack. Yeah. No. You can imagine the arguments we have.
Do you feel like you know yourself very well?
Yeah, quite well. Yeah. I feel like I do. Yeah, I'm quite sort of controlled of what I do, I think. It's a good question.
Any coming project?
Well, I'm trying to write again, but I don't want to talk about it really.
And
I think sometimes if you're working on something and you tell too many people, it can pop like a balloon. It can take some of the energy out of it. And so I think you have to be careful about when and how you tell people what you're doing. I think sometimes it can be really useful to tell someone to sort of think through the ideas and test it on people. You
need to tell the right people, I guess.
Yeah.
When you're writing, do you not paint? Or do you still...
I don't really paint anymore. I basically write. I don't really paint. I draw here and I draw a bit, but I don't... I suppose I write with the idea that it might generate some income one day, though, but I don't really paint like that anymore at the moment anyway.
Okay. Have you sold some paintings?
I have sold paintings, yeah. Okay. Yeah, in the past, yeah.
Anything new you want to learn to do? Like singing or...
Getting into gardening.
Gardening?
Yeah. And...
Do you have a big garden?
No, not really. Like a London... Not much bigger than this room. A bit bigger than this room.
That's big already for me.
Yeah. We're lucky. Yeah. Yeah, I've always wanted to learn the piano. But I never got around to it. And I lost a finger when I was injured. So I think it'd be really interesting to try and learn. Yeah.
Any last recommendation?
Of anything at all?
Yeah.
Recommend, like art recommendation?
At the beginning, people were giving names of books, movies, but then people started to just give advices like eat well. Or
eat well. Well, I think eat well is a good one.
Go to the gym today.
God, just I think break bread with people. Don't on the eat well thing. I think there's too much. Because we all fail when we say we're not going to. Anyway. If we're trying to be good all the time, we fail. So I think you have to also be bad sometimes.
Eat pizza.
You need to eat pizza every now and again, but not too much. Not 3 days a week. Not 3 days on the weekend, which is what I've just done.
You had pizza every day?
Yeah, well, Friday night we saw friends. Saturday night went to see some cycling at the velodrome near us, going round and round and round, and had pizza. And then it was the Euros final, so we had pizza then too.
Oh, of course.
So there's a lot of pizza going.
Yeah. Do you follow football a lot? Or?
Yeah.
Were you crying?
No.
No.
Well,
on that note, thank you.
Thank you so much. It was really fun.
Giving your time. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5 stars on your favorite platform. It really supports me, and then I can interview all the artists of the world until I die. Merci!